Hi, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to welcome Jessica Nelson Kohel today. Jessica is the founder and CEO of the PMX Group, which is a niche product consultancy. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks, Cassie. Happy to be here.
This series is really about product coaching. Product training has become a large part of that as well. And I realized that product consulting is something where there's a lot of overlap in what happens with regards to coaching and training, and as well as other services that could be provided. Maybe you can share a little bit more about the PMX Group, what you do, and your view on what that overlap looks like.
Yeah. At the PMX Group, we're not traditional product coaches. I know it feels like that market has gotten more and more crowded in the last couple of years, and I've actually been consulting in product for about 12 years now. And I got really started in that because being an FTE as a PM or a product leader can be stressful and lonely. And you really have, your network, but you also have just the team internally. And there's a lot of support that could be valuable externally or with a team of people that aren't your in-house full-time team dealing with the same issues or the same tension and things that are going on in that environment. And so it felt like there just had to be a better way, a more supportive way with less burnout to do product and to do it well. And that was kind of the impetus for me, exploring other product roles outside of that FTE in-house. And that's kind of how I transitioned into consulting. And what I started noticing as a consultant was every engagement that I went into, there were these differences and this value that I brought as an outside perspective to that company or to that team and to those individuals that I was working with. So I would come in and have a different view, fresh eyes, fresh ears. I would have the ability to kind of see what was going on with a different objective lens and bring suggestions and see things that others just didn't see the same way because they had been there ingrained for however long, and used to those issues or used to that product, and just, you get complacent at times, or you've been working on the same thing for a long time. And, it was just an eye-opening experience for a lot of people because they'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed that sitting right in front of me. There's so much low-hanging fruit. Or how did I not realize that that was what's really going on? I should have seen that. And it's just, there's something different about kind of bringing that consulting outside perspective. And there's also something where people confide in you differently. They'll give you different information, or you gain their trust and they want to vent, or they want to commiserate, or they want to share and collaborate and problem solve differently. And so it has sort of a different relationship context. And they just share different information. And so I was able to act as a counsel in a way that other internal folks on their team didn't. And so those two elements sort of gave me the lens as a consultant that really made it feel rewarding in a different way than having been a product FTE. And so that was something that when starting the PMX Group, we really wanted to carry forward and provide both to our team of consultants and then to the clients that we work with as well, whether we're bringing ourselves on for a coaching focused scope or for some other problem that we're solving, for that product team, and coaching is a part of it, or it's just part of the approach that we bring.
Right. Wow. I think that, I imagine for a lot of our listeners, I really appreciate your story of talking about that, growing up in the FTE land, right? You're like, okay, here I am, and I'm on the ladder, and I'm going to climb this ladder as an FTE and have the impact and grow. And it's often not like commonly understood as an option to think about other ways to grow in your career, let alone to have other resources like this that can even help you if you do want to stay on that ladder, like help you go up the ladder, better or easier or whatever the right adjective is there, right?
Or differently. You hit on a really good point, actually, because when I left my last full-time in-house role, I really was struggling. I didn't really want to manage people. I didn't want to keep growing into leadership roles. I loved being in the work, having my sleeves rolled up, working with developers, talking about solutions. What if we did it this way?
Mhm.
Stakeholders want it faster. What if we did this? Would this be, just all of that really nitty gritty being in the work. And I remember thinking, if I keep staying in IC roles, that's going to look so bad on my resume. And there was like nobody to tell me that's okay. There are these other ways you can go on the ladder. And I remember it was almost shameful to have that IC situation on your resume for too long, or it was assumed to be a negative thing, right?
Mhm.
Actually just wrote an article about this around super ICs and being so glad that they're getting their time in the spotlight right now. And there's titles for these things now because that's like so near and dear to my heart
Mhm.
because there didn't used to be that. But yeah, I remember having so much internal shame for that and wondering where I would go. And there weren't product coaches back then either. But I remember leaving that role and wondering, what am I going to do? Am I stepping out into this like unknown world? Is this a huge mistake? I'm taking a risk, and I'm very glad I did it in hindsight. But it was definitely at the time a less chartered path and something that wasn't as common. Back then, which was, like early, I don't know, 2010s.
Mhm.
So yeah, it just wasn't as common yet.
Right. Yeah. The tide is really shifting for that, right? Like, um, and we'll put a link to your article in the show notes so
Yeah.
readers or listeners or watchers can go and check that out. But yeah, I mean, I know a friend of mine, she just recently, she's been a director at some of the really large companies in Silicon Valley and managing managers, and she just took a principal role, and it's in Gen AI, and it's just back to building. And I think especially with AI, right?
Yeah.
That's just becoming more practical, where the people who have that strategic ability can also execute are really going to be, doing, I think, very well in their careers. So
Yeah. And it just gives you the ability to do things differently, not have to, I dabbled in one direct level leadership role and I spent so much of my time on people related scope that wasn't like developing product careers, right? It wasn't like the fun leadership growth related people scope. It was like the time consuming stuff where you're like, can I go back to the product work now with my team? And the things that we enjoy doing. And I just remember thinking some of those weeks, this isn't it for me. Like this isn't, how do I turn this into a positive career move, and channel this into something that looks like a good trajectory, and there wasn't just a clear path for that yet. And so yeah, I'm just really glad that product has shifted, the whole landscape has shifted in this way where there's consulting, there's coaching, there's a myriad of titles now for these IC roles that allow us to grow in different ways on the ladder and have these different options. And it's very refreshing. Just in time for AI to shake it all up again and have everybody worried about whether they're going to have a job at all. But, I don't think that's true either. And I think there's going to be options. It's just always something we have to adapt
oh
to.
my goodness.
So I think that's the nature of this career. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, it would be great to learn more about, some of your experience working with organizations, and how coaching factors into that. Maybe you can share a little bit more about an engagement or a client that you've had recently where that really tells a tale.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, where do I begin? Okay, I have a few. I wrote down some examples so I didn't just ramble for ages. Okay, well, so essentially we approach kind of all of our engagements with sort of an assessment and discovery period in the beginning, regardless of what we are brought on to do. How long that discovery period is and how in depth it is, of course, varies based on, what the client has described to us and what they're asking for. Some clients ask outright to have, coaching and upskilling done for their product teams. So depending on, the size, maturity of the organization, what type of product team they have already. We may come in to, upskill or train a team on how to think more strategically and how to go more broad when they dig into what problems they're solving. How to not just take literally a piece of customer feedback and solve exactly what is being asked for, but to think, why is a customer running into this problem every day? What is the broader issue at hand here with the experience? Why are they running into this? And what is the root cause of that? Versus, hey, let's just fix this particular feature so that that doesn't happen. So those are a bit more literal. You can go in, you know exactly what to look for and, dig around for, and you're designing training and workshops and different exercises and things. There are other situations where we have a description of a set of issues in a team, which may be anything from product and engineering aren't working well together to the product team isn't delivering a ton of value, to they're not bringing innovative ideas to the table, to we have a lot of turnover on product. So a myriad of different, things that are going on for whatever reason the team is struggling. In that case, we're going to come in, we're going to help the team, we're going to immerse and do discovery, but we're going to learn by doing. So we're not going to be consultants in the corner just watching and taking notes. Nobody knows what we're there for. We're going to get in the weeds. We're going to act as a PM on the team because that's how we're going to best gain trust from those teams. We're going to immerse and actually get work done so that we're participating in those processes, getting to know the people and actually experiencing the environment ourselves, because that's the best way for us to truly see what's happening. That's going to give us the insights that we're really looking for. So not what a leader is telling us from their perspective, but what the team's actually experiencing, and we're getting to know them. But we're also talking to stakeholders and executives and hearing things from their perspective. So we're getting really all angles of what's happening. So we're able to tell, how much of what we initially heard is accurate, how much more can we learn from being part of what's happening, and, what else is going on. So we're able to kind of gain insights across the board. From all those perspectives, then we're able to really customize our ongoing approach and be a partner in action with that client. Because I think one of the differences for our approach and our playbook is the action. We're not just coaching and kind of, I always say therapy is only as good as what you do with what your therapist advises you after you leave the session, right? If you don't take any of the learnings and apply them to your life, the therapy is just that hour where you're sitting there with your therapist, right? So with our coaching, we want to practice things with you. We want to see things in action. We want to actually help you implement these things and make fundamental changes within your organization, not just tell you what to do and then leave you to go do it. So the action, partnering with you, actually being immersed to help you implement our recommendations is a big part of how we help the success actually occur and be a long-term part of the organization. So it's kind of that two-prong approach, the discovery and assessment to really gain the trust and learn everything, but then the partnering in action to implement it and see it through. And that allows us to actually give closer to real-time feedback, like see how it's going, course correct. So it's really a more, a more mid to long-term implementation than just here you go, now we're out. So it's a higher degree of success in that way as well. So we've seen that work in a number of instances where we've been with certain clients more heavily up front, but then tapered and stayed with them for much longer in a capacity where we're able to oversee and help advise.
That's so interesting. I think it's great to hear about the scope of discovery, right? It's not simply about the velocity of the team or the features that are being put out, but understanding, of course, the strategic impact, but also, oh, what's going on with product operations and how are the different teams collaborating, or is there some friction there that can be worked out, et cetera. And that, and I can really appreciate that perspective, which is probably one that people would bring if they haven't worked with a consultant, which is it's easier to see it when you're on the inside, right?
Way
But
easier.
it's also easier to name it if you're coming from the outside and then seeing it on the inside. And I think that that culturally, makes it safer for people somehow.
Way safer, and people don't always self-identify accurately. So if someone's just telling you what they think is going on, maybe like 80% of that could be accurate, but that 20% could be a big part of things. And if that's not accurate, then your solution wouldn't address everything, right? The other piece is that the whole discovery, no client, if we tell them, oh, we're going to come in, we're going to do 6 weeks of discovery and then we'll get to the solution, is going to be like, oh, that's not. The discovery is we're working, we're adding value, we're helping the team execute, we're working on product work while we're doing that. So we're delivering actual product value during that discovery. So the client's getting immediate value and velocity out of us while that discovery is taking place in tandem. So that's also a huge value add, because you're not sort of waiting around for us to learn stuff and then give you recommendations. So that's a huge benefit as well. But a lot of the time, the self-awareness is only partially accurate. So if we were solely relying on that sole person up front to self-diagnose what's going on, we wouldn't get the whole picture. So the immersive discovery is a big part of it.
Immersive discovery. Great. It's a new term we'll start in here. Yeah. That makes sense, right? So you jump in and you're looking, you're joining in the rituals, you're having those management style conversations, you're kind of from in the mix of doing the work, then you're observing and experiencing what it's like.
For sure. Well, because here's a great example. How often you're a leader, you've experienced being a leader, you've also experienced being an IC, and the experiences are very different. So depending on the type of leader you have, sometimes you feel like this person truly has an open door policy. You can give honest feedback. It will be listened to. It's valuable. You truly feel like you can be honest and you will be heard, and you don't feel fearful of that. You've probably had other leaders where they tell you can give them feedback and you're like, I would not feel comfortable giving honest feedback to that particular leader for many reasons. I just, I don't feel safe doing that. So in that case, you aren't in a position where you can actually say the things that you might need to say to make your job better or create a better environment or help you perform better, because for whatever reason, you don't feel like you can give that person honest feedback. If that leader was asking us to coach their team and saying, here are the problems that we have, those likely are not accurate, because that leader is not getting honest feedback from their team because their team does not feel like they can give them honest feedback. So that person might come to us and diagnose one set of problems. I can almost guarantee that when we get in there and start talking to their team, we're going to hear a totally different set of feedback. So the solutions that we would design and the things that we would bring to the table in that case would be drastically different after our discovery phase than if we had just spoken to that leader up front. That makes sense. I didn't set that up as well as I probably could have, but you get the idea. Self-diagnosis is not always accurate. So yeah, it's, we had a leader once tell us, like, the product team's just not innovative. We want to train them on how to be more innovative. And after we worked with the product team for a month, it turned out that they had been bringing innovative suggestions for months or years, and they had been getting shut down in meetings, or kind of their suggestions just never made the roadmap. The leadership team put their priorities and ideas every time. And so the team just stopped bringing suggestions eventually because they never felt like they went anywhere. And so it wasn't that they didn't have ideas, they just never felt heard. And so they stopped presenting them. So it wasn't an issue of innovation at all. It was an issue of feeling shut down and undervalued. So different issues.
It's so unfortunate. I've observed that firsthand, right?
Yeah.
Like the CEO relationship with the rest of the company and the team, and there's power dynamics are really, interesting and challenging to navigate. And I think it's important to share, right? You're being brought in by often, sometimes it's the head of product or CPO, sometimes it's the CEO, right? Like who are the stakeholders that are bringing you in to these organizations, and how can maybe product people that are listening to this, or even CEOs or founders, think about that? Like who's your main stakeholder typically?
Yeah, good question. So any of the above that you just said. So in an earlier stage company, it could be founder, CEO. This is typically where they're going to have a very lean or non-existent product org thus far. The founder, CEO has been sort of acting as the CPO or main product person themselves. Those folks typically bring us in when they're ready to graduate from that point, and they're looking for some coaching on the right type of product person to hire or bring on first and how to go about that process. They're also usually looking for some coaching on how to delegate and give up some of that. And that's a very challenging position to be in, because founder-led companies, it's very emotional, very personal. The product is their baby. They've been running things for multiple years generally at that point, and it's a really really emotional inflection point, right, for most founders. So that's really common. We also get then brought in at growth stage inflection points a lot. So post fundraise, so post Series A, Series B, getting ready to really scale the product team, and needing some advisement on how to grow the org, the right types of leadership hires to make, the different product ops things that need to happen kind of when you're going from a 50-person-ish company and you're going to be going to that couple hundred plus mark in the next couple years or year. Turnarounds, so there's a lot of the org's been just not functioning well for a while, a lot of turnover, or challenges within product and engineering, replatforming, those types of things happening, or just a general kind of reorg turnaround type situation is going to be happening. We get brought in a lot of times by a CTO or VP of product and tech, or somebody in the C-suite that's over product and tech in those cases. If there's no product leader, so this is relatively common, we would get brought in by a technology leader who's acting in the absence of a product leader and stretched really thin. So they'd bring us in for gap coverage, hiring help, and to kind of fill in that sense, and advise on helping the team and filling in and who to bring on. Those are some of the biggest use cases, I would say. Another one is newly hired product leader with just way too much to do. So essentially, that's, you wish you could clone yourself, basically. There's so much to do that there could be 3 of you for the next year, and there still wouldn't be, enough hours in the day. So that's a great one. And a coach or a consultant can really help add to your velocity, but also help advise on just where to keep focus, and, where to make trade-offs. And there's just so many priorities, and a lot of the work is really stressful. And so someone to support in that area can be hugely valuable as well.
I mean, that's so interesting. I'd love to touch on 2 things that you just mentioned. The first is the CEO and CPO relationship, especially, and then the next one would be what you just shared with the new product person coming in. Maybe we can jump back to the CEO one, because you talked about, that happens, right? In a lot of startups, founders are the CPO by default, whether they have product experience or not. And then they realize bringing in somebody with that product experience can really help. And there's probably lots of different ways to do that. But there's plenty of articles that show those types of roles have a pretty quick turnover sometimes, right? Like, are you pairing an execution-based CPO or head of product or VP of product with a visionary CEO, or is the CEO very hands-on and execution oriented, and they need somebody that's going to be bringing some spirit and vision and inspiration for the team? Like there's so many combinations of that. And to maybe make this like a little mini coaching, right, for either a CEO or a head of product, what are some kind of, I don't know, like examples of scenarios or coaching moments that you may have had in those situations that might be useful for our audience?
Oh, that's a great question. So largely it depends, which I know is an answer that everyone loves in product, but it's very true. So it depends on a couple things. The first is the rest of the company. So it depends on if the company is how mature the rest of the company is. So one example, we're working with a company that has a very mature company, but no product org. So the rest of the company has been growing and growing and growing, and that includes the technology organization. And they've just not really invested in product because they've been able to get away with the CEO continuing to lead product for a very long time. And they've been very successful, but they really need to mature from that and, bring on product help to balance out the amount of growth the technology organization has experienced and free up the CEO to work on more strategic things, fundraising, etc. Because the CEO is also the founder and has taken the company really farther than we see in most other cases. It's even more challenging for that person to delegate and release some of that control. Luckily, they have great vision and the product has been very successful to date. So there's a few things that are really positive that the company has going for them. In that case, initially that CEO really wanted to just bring on somebody really tactical that they could, not necessarily an order taker, but somebody just more, to execute on their all of their wishes. Our advisement, however, was that this person really needed a leader that they could have confidence and trust in so that they could lift out of the details in a way that was effective, scalable, and that, would truly give them back this time and allow the organization to grow and succeed without the CEO still technically owning everything, right? Because without someone that can push back, set boundaries, have some of that vision and strategy, know when to give the right updates, how to keep the CEO in the loop, how to give them comfort and confidence and keep the team accountable in the right ways, somebody who's just executing just perpetuates the problem, right? It's just somebody else who's doing all the things that are happening now. It still requires the CEO to be in everything. It still requires them to give all of the orders or directives, set the strategy, set the vision, prioritize the things that are being executed on, right? It doesn't solve the problem. So in that case, we really demonstrated pushing back and saying, hey, this is what we were brought on to do, right? We'd be remiss not to push back in this case. This is something that we're extremely experienced in and have seen countless times. And the whole purpose of this is to, create value and trust and confidence in your organization. And ultimately we were successful in convincing that. It took a bit of time, but ultimately we did win out in convincing the leadership hire side of things and making a really good case for that. So that was a successful engagement.
Wow. I mean, it almost feels
hard.
So fun. Any founder that's looking to make such a crucial hire, it feels like it makes so much sense to get an outside perspective on that, right? And And that's where, I think coaching and or consulting, right? Um, sometimes it's perceived, I think, as, oh, well, I know enough, I have enough experience, right? It's not necessarily about whether you have the experience or have the knowledge. It's that outside perspective that can really help you see around blind spots, or see things that you just don't have the ability to see from the inside, right? And I think that's a lot of the value that can be gained.
Well, and I think too, it's different than, because I'm not an FTE,
Mhm.
I'm not scared to say that to somebody, right? Like it just it has a different psychology to it, and it's like I'm being paid as a consultant to give you this advice.
Yeah.
Whereas an FTE feels like, oh, I don't want to offend my boss, or I don't want to step out of line and say something that I shouldn't say. So I'm not going to push back too heavily on this because I don't want to lose my job, or, I'm out of line or something along, there's this other sentiment to it. Whereas I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you what I think, because that's what you hired me to do, right? And so as a partner to you, I wouldn't be a good partner if I didn't give you my expert opinion, which
Yeah.
is that's not the right hire for you. The right hire is a partner, an experienced leadership partner who can help you get to the next level, who you can trust, who you can have confidence in your vision going forward, in the way that you need it to, that can carry things if you aren't here, or, you need a number two to you, like it, and so I just think there's a different mindset when you're a consultant, and you have less fear of, what's going to happen when you deliver tough news, or, push back. And so there's just, yeah, there's a different tone to it. And
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
hard. It's like, it's not like I don't, it's not like I don't like giving, or it's not like I love giving hard information, or, but it gets easier, and you can develop that rapport and say, listen, I know this might not be something you're gonna love hearing, but I have
Mhm.
to tell you, and, here's why. And as long as you can, give good context and make sure that you give positive reasons and outcomes and all of that, it usually goes well, and people are thankful for it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've experienced it myself, right? Having been an FTE and then fractional advising, I think I have had that conversation with the CEO and founder where they say, I want you to tell me everything you're observing, and not to do a witch hunt, right? But
Yeah.
to learn, how am I going to lead this company better, right? And if hot tip for anybody that does hire a coach or a consultant, make that psychologically safe space just up front, right? Because then you're going to get 10 times the value out of whatever you're doing, if that's really expected, to have people share those insights. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. Now you'll also have people that will not listen to you. And that is also something that you cannot always control. I've had to coach my own team many, many, many times on this, on not taking it horribly personally. If you can't, force change, you can only go so far as to shine the light and
Mhm.
make your recommendations and give the information, that you have, and share your expertise. You cannot force anybody to take your advice, or it's theirs to do what they want with, and that's okay. But that can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes, because it's like we can see so clearly what we think should happen and what needs to happen, and we can see the mistakes like about to happen, or we want so badly to help folks avoid them, or but you can't always, and it's just it's
Yeah.
just the beast.
Well, and I think that's probably also, I mean, ultimately, that's always going to be the end case in a lot of situations. But what you said before in the beginning, right, about being shoulder to shoulder, working with people and doing the work, that helps you earn the trust. And people understand through that you're observing and you're connecting dots from the multitude of other experiences that your team has had. So maybe we can get back to then that other example you started to share, which was an incoming new what is it, VP of Product or CPO, that seems a little bit at odds to me, right? Like if you're coming in as a new hire saying, I'm also going to bring in a consulting or a coaching group, though I do think coming in as a new hire is the perfect time to advocate for having an executive coach if you are a incoming head of product. Like that seems as a great litmus test for your executive team to see if they'll include in your package. But for more of a consulting component to that, that's probably a new concept for a lot of people. Can you share more about that example?
Yeah. So this one was interesting. So a few things came together really nicely in this example. So we were in talks with this client prior to their new product leader coming on board. So we were going to help fill a gap, talking to their engineering leader at that time. Then they found a product leader during our conversations. However, there was so much to get done that product leader resumed those conversations with us once they started and said, hey, this is actually great. There are vacancies. There's so much to get done. I could use all the help I can get. So let's work together and start at the same time in partnership. Basically, we set it up as, we'll act as an extension of this new product VP, provide an executive level partner to them, as well as some IC level additional support. So, because, this is a larger organization. So what we're able to do is essentially clone the velocity of this leader. So with the turnaround type situation and the amount to get done that there was, it essentially expanded the reach and the impact and accelerated what they were able to get done in their first 6 months by double, because of the addition of a second executive from our team. And we were able to attack that turnaround and so many of those improvements from more angles, be in more places, more eyes and ears, and act as, an extension. And so instead of, that person starting and being immediately behind and not able to be in 10 places at once and all of those things taking longer than they needed to, we were able to enact so much more change so much more quickly. And, really just get more done and turn things around way faster. And I think because there were two folks, there were a lot of trust issues and a lot of leftover residual toxicity and things just from a lot of what had been going on, previously at that organization. And so I think having kind of two new people, it allowed trust to be rebuilt within the organization a lot more quickly. So they had a lot of trust issues, largely just because there had been in the past some leadership by fear and, some layoffs and just different turnover, unexplainable turnover that, the teams just weren't as trusting of leadership for a while. So I think having some consulting and new FTE was a combination that created a little bit more spread out trust. So people didn't feel necessarily like they had to, oh, it's this new leader, we need to give it time and be uncertain. Oh, well, no, we have this other person too. Maybe we can kind of suss out both of these and figure out where we want to, align. And I think it allowed people a little bit of choice, to kind of figure out how they felt and where they wanted to land. And yeah, I think it just smoothed things over in a way that was really helpful in those first 6 months. And again, just exponentially faster results in terms of turning things around and getting things in order. One person was also able to focus more on team dynamics and hiring, whereas one was able to focus on product ops and organization of teams and squads. And so they were just able to really divide and conquer.
Wow, I think that's so interesting. And I also, I can imagine if you're an IC on that team, seeing two leaders come in, one that's the FTE and one that's from the PMX group, or, would make it feel like, oh, they're working so well together and they're really complementing each other. I'm seeing that collaborative dynamic, which, can come when you bring somebody in, and then that feels inspirational a little bit, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Within 30 days, I mean, well, within a week, we were having people be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so refreshing. And within 30 days, folks were saying it's like night and day, which was amazing. And then about 6 months in, the leader said, I never want to start another job without y'all by my side. And we were like, well, that is a lovely, lovely testimonial. So, yeah.
Hey, yeah.
It's just, I mean, the ability, it was really just you. It's like wanting to clone yourself. When you're brand new at a role, your to-do list just grows by the day, and you kind of, you can't be everywhere at once, and it's like having a second one of you in other rooms that you can't be in. And I think that was like the biggest way, the best way to describe it for them. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that we have Phil Terry as a part of this series. They wrote this book called Never Search Alone, and it teaches people how to use job search councils to find a job. And there's a lot of, very successful executives that are using this method. And one of the components of that process includes writing an OKR document when you're going to go into a new role, and then leveraging that OKR document in your negotiations. And wow, what an interesting concept, right? You can negotiate in as an executive, your executive coach, but especially in turnaround situations, you should hopefully know what you're getting. Like, hopefully that VP knew what she was getting into in terms of really establishing a practice at a company that didn't have one before. It's really great to know there's tools like this, right?
yeah.
This is a tool in the toolbox, and you could include something like that. Would just demonstrate a lot of experience and savvy, I think, around, okay, well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to have to build a team. Let me bring in somebody to support on that. I'll be the glue with the leadership team in establishing this practice, but this group can come in and it's temporary and helps me make sure we're not rushing hiring decisions and other things, that we're really being measured and strategic about it. I think that's so interesting.
A good way to suss out how your potential new employer feels about help and coaching and ongoing education and support and all those things too.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you also shared something interesting with me about, and this is more about just coaching culture and the benefit of, at the PMX group, you have a lot of product managers, right, that work for you, and are working across these different clients, but you've got a great culture of like peer coaching. And maybe you can share a little bit more about that as well. How does that work with you, and what could our listeners take away from that in terms of how to apply that in their own lives?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, when we started this team and this model, I think we knew that supporting each other as a team was going to be a huge benefit, but I don't think we realized quite how amazing it was going to be. Being a PM can be lonely. I mean, as an independent consultant, it was very lonely, just by nature because I was independent. But as an in-house PM, it can be lonely as well. You're either on a small team or you're just working on the same product all the time and talking to people that are also working on that same stuff. And so you don't get a lot of that variety or the different perspectives or, things outside of your direct subject matter. And in this model, our whole team, which flexes, the size flexes, right? We've had at times around 15 people, other times we've had, 4 or 5, it just sort of depends. But having 15 people that are working on totally different projects, clients, product types, team sizes, company stages, industries, it creates an extremely interesting blend of information. And the ability to support one another in the challenges that we face, respecting client confidentiality, of course, but, to be able to bring a challenge and say, hey, I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. has anyone handled this type of thing recently? Tips or tricks? Can anybody give me a quick 10 minutes? Somebody will pipe up on Slack and say, I just handled something similar, or I just implemented this over here. Or, oh my gosh, I solved this a couple months ago. Over here, I have a one pager on my top learnings. Let me find that and I can walk you through a couple do's and don'ts. It's like having a secret arsenal of like personal coaches who are also your colleagues and friends and want to see you do really well, who are also product experts, who are amazing at what they do at your disposal. And we all have, similar working styles in that we are consultants. So we're all dealing with the same types of models where we are coming in from the outside and onboarding regularly and dealing with challenges and coming into teams as outsiders and having to set clear boundaries and have tough conversations and do all these different things. And so it just really provides a sense of camaraderie and learning and collaboration that goes above and beyond even what we thought it would be, and is just very different than working on any product team I've ever worked on, and it's been invaluable. So highly recommend for anybody that has the ability to work on a team like that. But it just is a very different, we just learn so much all the time, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll put some resources in the show notes. I'm thinking of 3 off the top of my head. There's Holland has a product leader summit, and there's a product leadership Slack. And she's on the board and one of the founders, I believe, of Women in Product. And then there's, of course, Lenny's newsletter. And then for those who have been through the continuous discovery habits programs or trainings with Teresa Torres, she's got one. And then Phil Terry has one as well with Collaborative Gain. So there are some external peer coaching resources available for product leaders and ICs, right? In some of those cases. So I think that just the spirit of that is so great to share and to talk about, so that it is lonely, right? Yeah. Leadership it's lonely at the top. Well, oftentimes, product people are leading teams and there's a high expectation of their leadership. And that comes from IC all the way up, right, through an executive. Yeah. And so getting some of that outside perspective, even just from a peer group in a community setting, can be awesome. And so let's all support each other as we're all growing and in our careers. So
exactly. I love it.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, thanks so much, Jessica. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me.
This podcast is an original production of Women in Product. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the Women in Product YouTube channel. Leave us a review so that others can discover us, or share this episode with someone you know. Original music provided by Jenny Hahn. Thanks for joining us.